With the NU metagame now about a week old, I feel it's only right for me to talk about my own personal VR for the tier. Now, of course, some of these rankings are still very subject to change because I'm frankly, still developing an opinion on some of these Pokemon, and some of them are also just surging in usage a bit. So it's kind of, you're in that weird area of the meta where some mons are going to keep getting better. Some of these mons maybe will fall off a little bit. But I've got a good feeling about how I like some of these new mons and some old mons even, so I'm going to talk about that today. Of course, before we get too far into it, a little reminder, do you like daily uploads? Do you like competitive Pokemon? Do you like me? Of course, the answer yes to any of those, man, drop a subscription. We're on our way to 10k subs by the end of the year. I can only do that with your help. So let's get started. Now, my S rank right now, and this is not in order of like viability or anything. That is just way too much hassle to trying to do that at this point in the meta. So it is what it is. I got my S rank of Flygon, Lycanroc Dusk, and T-Flame. Flygon is, in my eyes, like the best mon the tier at this point. It's got a million good sets, and just off the dome, I could say Scarf, Banded, Dragon Dance, and then like a Jetpack, Stealth Rock, pretty good on some weathers. Y'all already know what Flygon does at this point. Vibe checking a lot of wall breakers as well, just with its Scarf set. Oh, and it's got that the Terra Bug with 2 bug attacks and Insect Plate set. Stealth Rock EQ, very nice. Sucks that it loses to Talonflame as hard as it does, but it's okay. You can even just you can like Soft Sand on that set as well and drop First Impression for Stone Edge if you want. And it's another cool offensive rocker Flygon set. But as y'all can tell, I mean, again, insanely versatile and pretty good matchup into a lot of the top threats. Scarf can beat Lycanroc Dusk. You have to worry about Sucker Punch, but they aren't all Sucker Punch. A lot of them are, but they aren't all. Decent instant matchup, decent in the Shao. It's nice at least that if you're banded, you can threaten Plume pretty consistently, especially compared to Slowbro. Nuke this, nuke this, nuke this, nuked. Pressure it pretty well and it doesn't have recovery. You pressure this, you can pressure this decently well. It's just a very solid mon, very good offensive profile, and really nothing to hate about it. Duskrock, of course, also up here. It's funny enough because I feel like this is almost in order of my viability, but these are both pretty similar in terms of where I rate them. But Lycanroc Dusk remains an incredible breaker, and the rising of both Slowbro and Crocodile have only opened it up more. Even Rhyperior Rising is like kind of a buff, not because they're rock types competing for a slot at all, but Rhyperior with Terra, if you want to talk about like Terra Fairy Rhyperior, that was a good check. So there's that. Crook leaving, of course, is good for Lycanroc Dusk because it was a Scarfer that didn't care about either priority move of yours, so whether you were Sucker Punch or a Celerock, it didn't matter, Crocodile was checking you. And Slowbro Rising is good because even though you had Terra Dark Crunch to beat it, they did run Colbur Berry a decent amount of the time, and Colbur Berry Slowbro was going to be at least a one-time check. So something that could stave off your sweeping efforts, potentially burn you with a Scald. All of that leaving just makes this mon even more insane as a wall breaker. So now, I mean, what are your checks looking like? Well, Terra Fairy Incineroar is still an option as a check. Something like Plume, although it runs Terra Water a lot, it can go Terra Fairy on teams that need it to. Same with like a Galarian Slowbro or a Swampert, even a Vaporeon. There's a lot of mons with random Terra Fairy that can check this. Now, of course, that opens up the question of, okay, well, what if I ran other attacks? What if I was like Iron Head? And yeah, that would negate some of these as options, but what's the cost? It means you're not running Sucker Punch or some other move. Again, you're talking about like trading matchups. The question with Lycanroc Dusk at this point and how balanced it's going to be viewed as within the context of NU is really going to come down to, does the rise of Crook and Slowbro open up actual set versatility? Because it's one thing to talk about Flygon, which has actual set versatility where it can run so many different sets and they're all great. Is Lycanroc Dusk's versatility going to be real? And what I mean by that is, are these other options going to actually be good and feasible to run? It's one thing to say you could run Iron Head. It's another thing for Iron Head to actually be a good move on it, though. You know what I mean? So we'll see how this mon develops. It's on my short list, it and Deoxys Defense, of Pokemon that I could definitely see me needing to have a ban vote on if we council voted them. And of course, Talonflame, S rank now, with Noivern leaving, the slot for fast pivot that defogs is literally just only Talon. And this mon also checks a lot of the tier. You want to look at some of that utility. So like Flygon, again, we talked about how a lot of Flygon sets do get checked by this. You check Xiao, you check the fighters, both Gallade and Lucario, you check Breloom, Croak. If it's a fighting type, you check it. And then having the ability to spread burns on some Pokemon like Hurt is also pretty cool, just because it helps open up some of your common teammates like Flygon to clear past them later on. Also very nice too, that it provides a really good source of speed for teams. So even though it's not necessarily an amazing revenge killer because it's kind of weak, it still can get that chip off on Pokemon and pick off like weakened threats when you need it to. And it prevents balanced teams from being too slow. Because, you know, sometimes people may end up foregoing a Scarfer entirely. Well, if you have a Talonflame, you at least do have something hitting pretty high speeds, and that can save you if you're trying to do some more priority spam-esque build for your speed control. Next up, A+, DOD is here. Shouldn't have to really explain this too much. Hazard control in NU is not the best, and DOD is a really good hazard setter, whether you're talking about just spikes, whether you're talking about a hazards lead set for hyper offense. Both ideas work really, really well. DOD is also very durable. It's got knockoff. You have like a lot going in your favor as a spike setter to get them up, keep them up, and set them up later again if they get removed. Other sets. What in the hell? I did not say you could play The Fridge by Jimothy Cool. I did not say you could do that. That was Jimothy. Hope you're okay with that happening in my video. God. But DOD, of course, very good spike setter, and with our hazard control being so porous, it's pretty scary in this meta. Other sets, of course, include the bulky setup, and I think that's where people are really going to talk about DOD maybe being overpowered. Spiking up and being annoying with your hazards is one thing, and historically that's actually what's gotten Deoxys defense banned out of OU into Ubers. But being able to use these bulky setup sets with like Cosmic Power and Taunt, or Calm Mind, of course, whichever one you pick, makes it really, really annoying to beat down because our methods of dealing with it, especially on the Taunt sets, just aren't very good. This mon is insanely bulky. No one's shocked by that. It's literally a Deoxys, and it is the defense form. It should be bulky. But you look at what NU has, and it's like, alright, well, Incineroar, if you're Swords Dance, yes, you can boost alongside this and muscle through it. The problem is if it's Taunt, then you're just shut down. Now, the cool thing is, if it's Taunt, I mean, you technically still outlast it, because you just U-turn, and it can't touch you. So, like, slow U-turn into whatever Pokemon, and then switch it back in, right? And over time, you can make this mon waste some power points. It's not going to be a clean interaction, but you can still bother it a lot. Same with other dark types, at least being able to play around this mon, kind of. But again, we talk about like actually muscling through it. I mean, something like a Alolan Muck, if it's Terra Poison, you can clear Smog it at least, and that's good. But if it's if you're Haze, then obviously that doesn't work anymore, and that's pretty tragic. So there's that to consider. And otherwise, I mean, what does Umbreon really do? Something like Klefki could trick a Toxic Orb onto it, which is pretty good. Of course, Terra Poison and Steel would deny that, but it's still good to trick off its more useful item. And hey, if they don't Terra predicting you to do that, maybe they just think you're gonna try to T-Wave, right? And they stay in. There's a pretty good way then to neuter this Pokemon. Same with like Bronzong, you could actually be Trick Toxic Orb Bronzong, and maybe do something like that. But again, that's where Taunt comes in. You're going to be slower. Klefki's got Prankster. So you've got some other faster trick users too. So you could have like Trick Scarf Shandy or like Trick Scarf Florges. Those would be able to dump a Scarf on this. But of course, the Dio is maybe going to be a little more aware of those efforts. The only concern with Dio thinking about those mons is like, Shandy may just be trying to be Specs and hit you hard. Florges may be trying to Calm Mind up alongside you and be Terra Steel. So there's at least enough set ambiguity with some of these options to where it's not like the cleanest interaction with Deoxys. But definitely a very hard mon to deal with. Very worthy, I would say, of being put this high up. Incineroar is next, and this one shouldn't surprise anyone for a couple reasons. One, I've been a very loud advocate of Incineroar, a premier yapper, if you will, in its favor. But also, yeah, I mean, we got 2 incredible bulky psychic types that dropped. And Incineroar helps check both of them. Both Cress and DoD at least have to respect the threat of Incin. We talked about the awkward lines versus DoD, but something like Cress just gets stunted on by Incin very, very reliably. Especially if Incin's paired with Wish support, to just always keep it at full. But SD Incin just blows this mon up, and even if you're like specially defensive, Sword Stance Battle, you will beat Cress. This mon is really weak, and so its Moonblast don't actually do much damage unless you're fully boosted, and even then, still don't really do that much damage. I think you do like 40-ish at +6, which is not good. Not at all. So very nice to help check those. And in general, I do really rate Incin quite highly as a wall breaker if you want to go with the more offensive EV spreads. Because what are the checks to +2 Incin, really? They're not great. A lot of them are Terror Reliant. But like something like Vileplume, I was not trying to point to. Vileplume is technically a Terror Reliant check if you're Terra Water, but still a little shaky. Or Fairy, either would. But like something like Talonflame, that's not stopping Incin. You're actually set up fodder. Flygon technically is a check, but if Incin Terras, then you're just losing your Flygon after quaking it. Lycanroc, again, forces the Terra, but it means you're losing your Mon. Same with a lot of these Mons, basically, the way you analyze them versus Incin as checks is you force it to Terra, and then maybe something else on your team kills it. Like, that applies to things like Shao as well, Legion, Gallade, Lucario, Feraligatr, Toxicroak. Toxicroak's nice, at least, because the most common Terra type on Incineroar is Fairy, and of course Croak's a poison type in addition to being a fighting type. So there's some room for outplaying there if you want to try and like predict the Terra and gunk it. But very strong Mon, and defensively offers a lot of good in the tier right now too, checking some of the scarier breakers like Shandy. And the cool thing about Incin too is Shandy's a pretty common partner for like Cress and DoD. So the fact that you check both of them is nice. Of course, there's concern maybe that you get overwhelmed, so you still want to pair it with another like Mon such as maybe like a Vapo or a Sylveon, or you know, something that can take a little bit of that pressure off of you. A Steel type good as well to contain DoD a bit more, maybe like a Copper Raja. But there's some nice room for Incineroar structures right now, and I rate this mon super highly. Shao is next. Me and Shao, I'm not on the same train as people thinking it's S rank. I think in this meta, it's actually a fair bit worse than in the Slowbro meta. And a big reason is Plume. Plume is a lot better now, and me and Shao just does not respect that, or appreciate that, I should say. It was bad enough that T-Flame was already great, because it just sucks having to take those turns to Stone Edge, especially when Slowbro plus Talonflame was a very common core. Like, you'd rather not. You'd rather be U-turning forever. And now that doesn't work nearly as well, because with Vileplume replacing Slowbro, you've got to deal with a mon that has Effect Spore and a mon that has Flame Body, often being stacked on the same team. We also got multiple bulky Psychics dropping. DoD and Cress are both good me and Shao checks, even if they still take a lot of chip from U-turn and Knock. They're still checks. Like, that literally is not changed. That doesn't help. Globro is a lot better now as well. Pom-Pom is still at a high point. We're seeing a lot of Spec Sylveon as well right now, which is kind of rough for Shao, given that if you CC lock, you're giving Sylveon turns to break, and this one's a very good breaker. I mean, literally look at the VR right now. You see my Steel types? The first one is down here. Glefkey and A-. So giving Spec Sylveon turns to break isn't great. And all this to say, right, me and Shao is still an incredible mon. It is the second best, I would argue, Scarfer in the tier. And it's got some cool sets like Protective Pads that at least kind of helps versus these. At the end of the day, I mean, sure, you dodged the status ailments, but that's about it. It's not a bad set at all. It's just kind of like, yeah, it gives you some extra security. That's really it. Bloom next. Like I said, some of this comes down to checking Shao. Some of this comes down to Slowbro rising to Aryu. Some of this comes down to being just a good catch-all check to a lot of physical attackers. As we said earlier, when it came to Incineroar, terastallizing is sometimes necessary, but like, for example, Flygon you check. Lycanroc you could check with Terra Fairy. You check this. You check Gallade with Terra, potentially. It's really awkward, but you technically can check Gallade. Lucario is not really a mon I would consider you checking, so I will not talk about it. You check Alolan Muck, and this mon's a lot better now. You check Mr. Breloom, you could check Feraligatr. You could check Nape with Terra, you could check Inteleon even with Terra. There's just a lot of Pokemon that Plume is able to stunt on, and find that very nice in this tier. It's also, like we said, very, very annoying. There's a lot of good pivots in Inu, and Plume kind of just switches into all of them. Threatens that effect spore status, and if you get paralyses on Pokemon like a Flygon or a Mienshao, a lot of the time that's just a, you know, it's a death sentence for them. They don't really have a lot more that they can do past that. And even just, you want to talk about like the effect Plume has on games. The nice thing is, things that want to take a Leech Seed from Plume typically do not get Sludge Bombed and appreciate it. So you're talking about like maybe a Breloom, for example. If you wanted to try to pivot around you a bit, well, okay, good luck if you get Sludge Bombed on entry. You know, Serena can't block your Leech Seed and avoid Sludge Bomb stuff. Brute Bonnet can't do that. Mo can't do that. Wo-Chien can't do that. A lot of time, if anything, Wo-Chien would be forced to Terra the next turn, and then okay, you get Leech Seed and you don't even do anything to me anyway. Very good mod. Very, 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 very good mod. Then we get is Legion up here. Legion's cool because it checks Luke, and Luke is definitely at least a bit better right now. I wouldn't say it's a ton better, because at the end of the day, really all the shifts did for Lucario was get rid of Slowbro, which debatable how big of a change that is for Lucario. It's at least a net positive, because again, you talk about like Colbur Berry Slowbro. That was a check to Lucario, but I don't know. I don't know how much it really changes, but Legion's cool because it's a nice offensive check. If you're Scarf, you just wave crash this Mon, literally wave it off and it's gone. What else was saying? You're gonna also be a good check to Shao because you can come in on CCs, which is nice. Rain is still really good as well, so you can do stuff there. You technically are for Alligator check, which is nice as well. Not sure it's the like best Gator check because you have to Terra Blast Ghost to really do much of anything for Alligator, but it's still at least something that can outspeed at least Swords Dance Gator. So, not the worst. I also just appreciate this mon as a wall breaker. In terms of switch-ins, with Brogon, there's obviously fewer things that want to take hits. There is a little bit of give and take here, because Vaporeon's a lot better now, and Vapo's just outright immune to your Water Move, so you have to burn Terra versus that. And it's not always the greatest thing, but it's a solid mon. Cloystar moved up to A as well, because I do think Slowbro Rising is like genuinely really good for this mon. But also I think Chinchino dropping is kind of cool, because there's definitely some hyper offense angles you can take with Tidy Up Chinchino and Sash Cloyster. So that's nice. But again, back to the Silver point, with Plume now being one of the more predominant physical walls, I mean, that's something you threaten a lot more effectively. Slowbro forced you to Terra. With Plume, it's the opposite. You force Plume to Terra. So I do like that a lot for hyper offense. It's just a nice interaction you get. Obviously, I mean, yeah, Vapo being more common's maybe the better phrasing. Vapo being more common isn't the greatest thing for Cloy, but it's not the end of the world either. Dragalge high still. Again, steel types aren't exactly amazing in Inu, or at least we haven't seen a ton of steel types pick up like heavy usage. And until they do, Dragalge's going to remain an incredibly dominant Pokemon because its primary answers are steel types. See how that works? Just a really good breaker, really good utility mon. I still like the Dragon Tail sets too, because it's just fun to prevent things like Umbreon from getting to safely Wish Pass to itself, or even just a Wish Pass in general. Just being able to force the shuffling around, always going to be really nice. And hey, Plume's really good. Dragalge's a pretty good Plume abuser, so there you go. Gallade next. Gallade is cool because all the physical walls, other than the steel types, not steels, psychics we got, basically just fall to it. Like, Talonflame doesn't want to take a Psycho, this doesn't want to take a Psycho. Even things like DOD and Crest, at least you can knock them, and it's pretty good. Alternatively, you can run the Night Slash Scopelands Gallade stuff, and if DOD tries boosting up versus you, it doesn't really work, because you have Night Slash for pre-Terra and then Psycho Cut for post-Terra. So that's a pretty fun interaction for Dio. Not for Dio. God, terrible one for Dio. Pretty nice one for Gallade. The downside to Gallade is Glowbro is a bit more common. And Glowbro at least doesn't get smacked by a crit Leaf Blade and die. Of course, Night Slash is a thing, but Glowbro can do Terra Fairy, I would say, a lot better than Slowbro, since, you know, Slowbro wanted to be a poison type, man. Wanted to have that immunity to Toxic. Glowbro is already immune to Toxic, so has a little bit more leeway of what Terra types it goes for. But Gallade, still remains an incredible breaker. Lucario also remains an incredible breaker slash sweeper. As I was saying earlier, I still don't know exactly how much I rate the Rise of Slowbro to benefit Luke. Like, you could probably argue Lucario up to here, put it in the A+ mons, because it is so scary when it gets +2, but again, the point is, okay, when's it getting +2? Because something we don't want to do is just assume that Lucario always has the best situation going for it. Lucario is not a very bulky Pokemon. As a result, it can definitely struggle to find good turns to set up. There's a lot of common mons that just dunk on it as well. Even something like a Vileplume, where in general I would say it's a pretty safe mon to set up on. It could be Stun Spore, and that, you know, your Luke, you don't really want to be Stun Spored. I mean, you have E-Speed, so you don't really care, but it opens up the pool of Pokemon that can revenge kill you a bit. And you gotta worry about more things that could be Terra Ghosting, or even just having like a Terra Steel coming out for you. Again, it's not just this safe setup chance. Alolan Muck, it could be Drain Punch. Admittedly, a lot of them aren't right now. They're gonna be Clear Smog, they're gonna be Haze, they're gonna be Rest Talk stuff. And Luke can set up on that, but you still have to respect Predator Drain. So like Glowbro, of course, not really something you want to try setting up on. Flamethrower is very good. Your Galgy, not really the poison type you want to set up on just because it's super strong. Because Focus Blast is very much a move it runs. So, it'd be tough to find setup chances with. It doesn't help that Talonflame is on every team practically and stunts on you unless you're like Lumberry. But it remains a very, very scary mon. When you get those SD chances, there's not a lot of teams that like reliably stop you, and you can even do stuff like Lumberry Luke, and that's pretty cool for helping out against T-Flame. So there's a little bit of versatility there for you. For you Luke enjoyers. Alolan Muck next. Now, this may have gone up from B+ to A. This is maybe a bit of overrise. You could argue Muck should still be more down like here. And I wouldn't necessarily fault you for saying that. I personally just really rate it highly right now in a metagame where bulky psychic types trying to set up and sweep you are commonplace. You know, Glowbro, DOD, Cress, all very good mons right now. Oricorio as well. This mon can actually help versus Ori. Of course, if it's on Taunt Terra Steel, yes, it'll beat you down. But hey, I mean, if it's not Taunt Terra Steel, then you can beat it down. Kind of. Sort of. Kind of, sort of. not the greatest sequences ever, but, you know, it's at least a nice stopgap to him. You also have a, you know, Shandy, or at least a check to the Shadow Balls. Monkey Dory, you check. Decent defensive mon. I think the defensive uses of this mon are a lot more clear now. It's maybe more a high A- mon or a low A mon, but I believe it is a much more solid spot in the tier. Oricorio next. This mon is dumb. I hate having to deal with it being maybe taunt or having Revelation Dance with the whole terastallizing interaction. It is incredibly annoying to actually deal with. And at least this comes down to, you know, personal experience stuff, so it's not always the most reliable thing to base an opinion on. But one of the things I hate the most about Oricorio is I feel like counterplay to it often comes down to just getting a critical hit. It's very annoying. I don't like that I have to, when I'm using Ori especially, I have to always feel like, okay, I win this game, but if I get crit, then I lose. That's probably like my least favorite part about it. Just, Ismod sweeps so many games, but also just loses to getting crit because it's really not that bulky. So even mons you want to try and set up on, like, say, Galvantula, for example, in the Webs matchup, you can definitely lead Ori and just deny those teams happiness. On the flip side, Galvantula is strong enough to where if it gets, like, Thunder into Thunder crit, you just lose. It's a mon I definitely am always struggling to decide how highly I rate it. But I think it's definitely kind of oppressive in the meta. You get a lot of matchups where this thing in theory just sweeps from turn 1. Because dealing with this, it's not the easiest. Like, how many mons really deny it from setting up? A lot of it comes down to just hoping you're a wall breaker that's strong enough to say no. So something like maybe like a Lycanroc Dusk doesn't really want to try setting up on that. So like a Spec Sylveon, you're not setting up on that. Gallade even, you gotta care about Terra Steel Gallade coming out. Luke, you don't really set up on either, just because this mon is quite strong. Like, it could Terra normally speed you immediately and just two-shot you. So that can be a little bit difficult, but I feel like when you do get a free setup chance, kind of the same with Luke, it is insanely annoying to deal with. The difference being, I feel like since Ori is a speed booster plus a bulk booster, it's that much more annoying to deal with once it's set up. At least Luke is only boosting attack, and it's pretty reliant on E-speed to clean. There's like immediate ways you can recognize counterplay, just through literally tearing into a ghost type. With Ori, it's not as simple, because the mon is becoming very, very fast, and it's, again, fewer Pokemon become capable of revenge killing this since it's getting bulkier too. Sometimes it's on terrain. It's got Grassy Seed, or maybe it's just running a Key Berry, which also boosts defense. It'd be very hard to beat. Glowbro next. Maybe some people would argue just like Muck, it should be a sub-rank lower. I don't care. Glowbro fits the Slowbro replacement quite well. One of the benefits it has over Bro as well is having Toxic, so you actually can spread a different type of status, and it's not even one that can miss, because you're a poison type. That's pretty neat. You also beat Vileplume a lot more reliably than Alolan Muck does, so you kind of fit that Dragalge mold of bulky poison type, which is nice. There's not really like a ton of truly bad matchups for this Pokemon either, which I kind of like. Like, the only awkward thing about it is its defensive typing's probably not the best. It gives you some nice utility for sure. Being immune to Toxic naturally is really cool. You resist fighting really well. You're not weak to Gallade Psycho Cut like some of these other Pokemon are. It's just being weak to EQ plus knockoff feels always kind of meh, because these are two of the most commonly wanted to be spammed moves in the entirety of Pokemon. So it's a little bit rough, but I don't think it's unplayable. And I think Glowbro definitely has rise potential. Like, it could get even better. Maybe it ends up always just feeling more like around here, because I think, if anything, defensively, the issue is you lacking useful resistances. It's like you don't resist this thing's EQ. You're weak to it. You're weak to Crunch, weak to Knock, but at least you resist CC really well. You don't resist this thing's moves. You don't resist, Water. Period. You don't resist Psychic. You don't resist Steel. That's where you can kind of start seeing some of the limitations in comparison to Slowbro. But as I said, I think the poison typing still offers quite a lot nice. Quite a lot that is nice. Oops, my bad. Especially, again, talk about like setup. It's nice that you don't have to Terra into a poison type, my bad. You don't have to Terastallize into a poison type to have the Toxic immunity. You just have that naturally. You could instead, like we said earlier, maybe be a Fairy type. And that's cool when you're trying to check other Pokemon like Gallade or Incineroar. Pert next. Like Pert a lot right now. Terra Fairy is a cool check to Lycanroc. Good pivot. Honestly, I'd have very little else to say. Just a reliable mon. Sylveon. I'm seeing a lot more spec Sylveon lately. And as we said with Dragalge, that's particularly good in a tier where Steel types are still trying to find their footing. So, yeah. Spec Sylveon goes up here. I also do like Calm Mind a fair bit. Whether it's like Calm Mind with Wish Pass, which it pretty much always is, or just some other budget Calm Mind. Even if you want to run the ZS set, where he goes like Moonblast Roar, I think that's pretty cool too. And if Vaporeon up to A, it's pretty clearly the best bulky water type right now. Pert's weird, because I don't really consider it a bulky water type because of the typing. Vapo actually resists the types. It's the best bulky water. Helps check Rain, which is pretty good, because I would argue Rain is one of the best hyper offense types in the tier. You have Haze and Roar, which is just cool because it gives you multiple ways to try and mess up with bulky setup from Pokemon like DoD and Cress. Obviously, yes, I did earlier mention DoD can run Taunt. Not every bulky set, though, does. Obviously, there was the set I ran with the Psynoise Nightshade from Power Memes. You also sometimes just see Double Dance with Calm Mind and Cosmic Power. And, of course, you could get rid of those boosts. Meanwhile, Crest just has nothing to stop you, which is nice. Just has to hope it's the last mon, and that you aren't, that you aren't Haze. So that's really good for this in this meta. You check Gator as well, which is pretty good. Important in this meta to have a Gator check. Solid mon. Now we're in A-. We got Breluminator. Some people will say this is a little high for Breloom. I say to you, I don't care. Good breaker. Having strong priority is always a positive as well. I believe Mach Punch is just as strong as Lycanroc's Accelerock. Maybe stronger? I don't remember which is better, Technician or Plus, but regardless, it is a very nice offense vibe check. Just having Mach Punch around to check things like, say, Lycanroc if it's not boosted, Flygon, Mian Shao, Lucario even, if it's not boosted too. Good move. Even, hell, it checks Terra Steel or Ikorio, which I like. And it is, again, I can refer you to the Breloom video we did. There's a lot of other sets. They just haven't seen a ton of usage yet, but I think Swords Dance, Sub Punch, Bulk Up all have different levels of usefulness to them. Even Scarf could be okay. I saw someone comment about Scarf Loom. I think there's some potential to that as well. Shandy's partly up here because it's just a really good partner for the Psychic types, whether you're talking like Bronzong, Cress, or DoD. It has some very good offensive synergy with them, but it also just remains one of the best breakers of the tier. I say best breakers as it's an A-, which may seem a little bit funny, but it is true. A lot of the mons that check it don't have recovery, and even the ones that do, it's like a lot of time either they hate Trick, or they have to care about which move you're going for. So like, for example, Vapo will take a lot more from Shadow Ball or Energy Ball. Umbreon takes like a ton from Specs Overheat, so it's not always safe. Cress and A-. I think Cress is just strictly a worse version of Deoxys Defense. I think it's way too weak. It takes a lot more turns to get going. Like, you could argue, okay, DoD technically takes a lot of turns to get going, but DoD is more of a stall setup mod a lot of the time. Cress is trying to win. Cress does not often win unless it gets some very ideal circumstances. Main problem with Cress in my eyes is this. It's so weak, and you really wish you were Terra Fairy because you want to actually get extra Moonblast chip. But you're not Terra Fairy because you want to Terra into something that helps you out versus Toxic. And so it's just this terrible cycle of not having a really good Terra type to pick that always has the applicability that you want out of it. And with Incineroar and my eyes being great, with Alolan Muck being really great, there's just a lot of natural roadblocks to Cress. In addition, DoD is like sometimes running sets very optimized to just say no to Cress and even other bulky setup. So, you know, that's not really fun. It's definitely still a really good mon. It still has a lot of reason to be respected, but I don't know. I don't view it that highly. I think if DoD were to be banned, Cress probably rises more up to like A, maybe even A+, just by virtue of the competition being less impressive. But I'd also say, keep in mind too, I talked about it just briefly there with the dark types. All counterplay to DoD applies to Cress, but it applies even more because there's no taunt. And it's even slower than DoD. So keep in mind things from earlier, like Bronzong trying to counter boost actually works. Bronzong beats Cress 1v1. Let that be known. Stored Power Bronzong will literally outboost Cress and win. Diancie next. I still think Meteor Beam Diancie is very good. Shifts didn't really change that, other than Bronzong slowly getting a little better. Which, in my defense, hey, I had Diancie up an A last time. Now it's an A-. So, reflects that. Vapo getting better, I guess, also hurts, but Diancie's still really, really good. And I find a lot of matchups, it's just got the same angle. Nice that Magnezone left as well, because, of course, Zone was a top-tier Steel type. And, yeah, it forced Diancie to Terra pretty frequently, and then you had to play a series of 50-50s between the Zone switching around between it and the Talonflame, which was never fun. Gator up to A-, now a little bit better than last time. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how good I think for Alligator is. Because no Bro helps, but at the same time, like, Slowbro didn't really do much to Gator other than threaten a Scaldburn. You know? And so Vaporeon's gonna do the same thing. Vileplume is still really common, and it can run Terra Water and continuously check Gator, just like it did in previous metas. So it's a little hard to really decide where Gator falls in my personal tiering. It's better, for sure, because again, no Colbur Bro does mean it is one less check. I just don't feel like one less check makes this one go from B+ to maybe lower end of A-, all the way up to S rank or A+ broken wall breaker. But it's noticeably better. Doesn't help that Croak's also better right now. There's definitely some trends going against this guy. Florg next. I like Florg. Definitely liked it a little more in the previous meta, just because you could go like Covert Cloak Florgus and beat up Slowbro reliably. But even in this meta, we've seen a lot of Scarf Florgus. It's still a pretty nice utility option, whether you go like Trick CM or like Trick Synthesis, 2 attacks. There's some versatility to it. And again, we talked about it in the vein of checking bulky setup. That still applies here, especially with Bronzong being so good. The cool thing is Florgus naturally lures in Bronzong, so you could find a good trick opportunity there. I'm Galv here because webs. Iron Thorns here. Y'all know at this point, I just rate Iron Thorns more highly than anyone else. But I think DD Booster Energy is still really good. And tier shifts didn't really make it. Tier shifts like actually did make it objectively a bit better in my eyes. Maybe we see more Quag going forward and that could be bad. Obviously Pert Rising's a bit bad for it, but Terrablast Grass is at least an option. You could pop both of those with. Boom on. Coverage is basically just always going to be your problem. You never really can have the perfect coverage across every game, so I do understand where some people would maybe feel lower about it. Keys an A-. Weather Enabler, it's good at that. I like spike sets as well. Actually, shout out to the Calm Mind Physically Defensive Spiker set. I think that set's actually really pretty good. Pretty cool mon. Trick Toxic Orb as well as, or Switcheroo, doesn't matter. The Switcheroo Toxic Orb is also pretty good in this meta because, again, literally being faster in this and being able to trick it is good. Even checking Cress. Like we said, it doesn't really matter if they Terra predicting the trick. It's still good to get rid of their passive recovery if they have it, or their helmet. Also, because you could... those sets, they often were Thunderwave too. It'd be like Spike's Foul Play, Switcheroo Thunderwave. So, okay, congrats. You Terra'd, now I T-Wave you, and you're still more manageable than you just were. So, Keys has a good amount of utility. I can actually see Keys getting more up into this range. The only concern with Keys is at a point, it does become a little difficult for it to go too high, because there's some real issues with Keys in terms of Dark types being immune to the utility, and then also just the stats not being that amazing. But the utility it offers is cool. Also, the Trick Toxic Orb stuff applies to Pom Pom, so Baba Booey. Monkey Dory next. I like Plot Monkey. I like Plot Monkey in this meta a lot because Terrablast Ground eviscerates the Incineroars and the Mucks, and again, good synergy with the Psychic types as a result. That's all. Scarf's also still good if you need if you're mad that we lost things like Noivern and Crook. Scarf Monkey is a nice option just to add some extra speed to your teams. Porygon Z and A-. I mean, Rhyperior leaving is a net positive. Nope, Scarf Crook is a net positive, I suppose. It's a little better. Also, again, like some of the other breakers, no Steel type usage being kind of low helps. My only concern with PZ is it sometimes can be a bit of a Terra merchant, where you do need to Terra to really have the true wall-breaking god powers, but it's not too big a deal. Croak A-, and Croak could keep going higher. If Vaporeon becomes, like, truly the meta, Toxicroak is always the natural response, because there's nothing Vapo can do to you. You just SD up, and SD Croak. I mean, again, like, how many of these mons up here really want to check it? Obviously, Glowbro can, but you still have to play the Terra game. I even saw Django use an EQ Croak lately. I think it was Scarf, but there's some options. Croak also is a decent Vileplume abuser because you outboost Strength Sap, and really the only thing it can do if it's not Stun Spore is it can Leech Seed you, and that's it. Serena, up to A- from last time I did this, was in B+. A little bit better now. Spinner, he can still knock Talonflame's boots, which is at least nice. Obviously, there's a lot of things going against Serena too, with Incineroar being good, Glowbro being good, but I think needing more hazard removal in a tier is at least enough for me to feel okay bumping it up to here. I also think Scarf Serena is just kind of a cool set, so leave me alone. But at Umbreon rounds out our A ranks. Wish Pass Umbreon is pretty solid right now, and Umbreon in general kind of just makes hyper offense teams sad. I've noticed an astonishing amount of such teams just get gapped by Umbreon. Whether it's Weather getting their turn stalled out, whether it's Umbreon just walling entire setup cores, which it should never do if you're building a good HO, but it can do it to some. And you still have Toxic to throw off at a lot of the mons that you see on HO that are used to beat Umbreon. Foul Play also beats up a lot of the physical attackers, so if they try to boost on your predicted switch, you get like Foul Play into Terra Poison Foul Play. It gets you some good lines. And now we get to the point where we start speedrunning. B+. Bramblegast is just still here. I mean, it does the same stuff it's always done. Offensive spin, pretty decent. Sometimes, like, Bandit could be cool. Bronzong, the Calm Mind Air Defense set from yesterday's video. It is legitimately good. That's all I can really say. It is legitimately good. It is a nice steel type. And it checks the OTR DNC stuff, which that gets it bonus points for me. Shinjino B+, I think there's some cool stuff you can do with Tidy Up on Hyper Offense with other, like, Focus Sash users, or, maybe even just Hazard Weak mons, like maybe got, like, a Defiant Tornadus Therian, and that's pretty cool to support them. Raja's actually a little bit better at beating Crest this gen than it was last gen, because you have knockoff, so you can get rid of the lefties, and you have Whirlwind still, so that's nice. Same applies to DoD, just once again, of course, you can't phase it if they're taunt, but they're not always taunt, so you get some decent matchups. And it's cool that you check Sylveon, which is, like we said, a rising star of the breakers. And it's cool, because Sylveon oftentimes doesn't even run coverage. It goes Terra Fairy with Hyper Voice, Draining Kiss, Psychic, and Shadow Ball. Ditto B+ still, Hyper Offense is still really good, so Ditto still's up here. Infernape B+, it's a bit better now with Slowbro gone, and with Talonflame as the predominant, you know, fast pivot, that's a little bit easier to pick off with Stone Edge. You actually can Flutter Blitz, Vileplume. There's still some issues for it with things like, you know, Glowbro not caring, Pert being a pretty good check, Vapo, Shandy, but it's at least somewhat better. Inteleon B+, you may think that things like Vapo and Toxicroak getting really good are bad for it, but end of the day, a lot of the sets aren't even Choice Lock that it runs. So who cares if I Snipe Shot or Surf or Hydro Pump or what have you in one of these mons? I could just U-turn out the next turn. Or maybe Croakai just Air Slash as it comes in and kill it. Pretty decent. Kilowatts roll, much better now. Some of this is due to Noivern leaving, some of this is due to Magnezone leaving, some of this is due to Rhyperior leaving. But as you can tell, I just listed a lot of mons that left that were good checks. You might think Crook leaving is good for it too, and maybe it is for Volt Absorb sets, but I think competitive Kilo has been really solid. I 1000% give all the credit to ZS for that. And with Crook gone, it means you don't get to abuse the Intimidate stuff. So that's a little unfortunate. But I think overall it got a lot better. So yeah. Kingdra B+. Maybe Kingdra should be a little lower, but I'm kind of just putting it up here with the other Rain mons because I think Rain is really strong. And I like Kingdra Rain more than Ludicolo Rain. Deal with it. H-Quill, Rain, good Sword Stance mon. It also happens to check the Psychic types though, which is nice for Rain to have. Registeel still B+. It does kind of just own some HOs that are too reliant on physical attackers, or offenses in general, if you're Iron Press. Having T-Wave at least to throw off at the Psychic types is cool as well, just so you're not ever truly dead weight versus them. And it's just, this is the most generic point I could make ever, but it's very bulky. Which matters insofar as it just meaning there's a lot of mons that cannot really, like, immediately overwhelm you, especially with Terra taken into consideration. I also saw someone use Ice Punch Registeel with Earthquake as their Oricorio Pom-Pom counterplay. And while I can't necessarily support that as a set, I can at least acknowledge that it was a set used, and it has a very clear purpose. Tentacruel up to B+. Y'all know this is a Rabiamon. I think Cruel, though, offers quite a lot of nice utility. Pivoting, item removal, spin, potentially poison spreading, potentially haze. Pretty good. I think Tenta's kind of the same issue with Keys, although it's not as pronounced, where the stats sometimes let you down. It's very passive, but not a huge deal when the moves you are using to attack are pivoting and knockoff. So, okay. Torn and B+, this is really just, again, just talking about Rain. But I do think some setup Torn stuff's okay, like Bulk Up for HO or even Nasty Plot, so there's that. Tort, still here for Shell Smash. Nothing really changed, although debatably you like seeing Glowbro a little more than regular Slowbro. And Plume you can kind of outplay if you're Terra Steel, so not that bad. Toxtricity, maybe Tox could go up to A-. I'm just still not sold. It likes the fact that Crook is gone, because that's one less mon to pivot into Overdrive, and it likes Rhyperior being gone, because that's one less mon that just straight up forces you to Terra to beat it. But I'm still a little unsure just how much that changes things for Toxtricity, because at the end of the day, it's a mid-speed tier wall breaker, and it's not like we're short of those in Inu. Look at right here, there's like 5 of them in this sub-tier. And up here, there's even more. So, I don't know. I saw someone say Toxtricity should be banned from Inu, and I saw that, and you know what? I said to myself, no, I don't think I will. I get it, because in terms of the damage Toxtricity does, it's pretty insane. but I think there's always more to the story than just doing damage, you know? And this Subi type B+, probably should be lower if I'm honest, so I'm gonna put it down here. Araquanid in B. I haven't actually seen Araquanid do much of anything yet, but this is for me an on-paper thing. I think it should still be a fine web setter, and it could definitely be kind of hard to switch around for teams that lack like a Dragalge or a Toxicroak, or even a Tentacruel, frankly. So there's that. Bonet in B. It does help that Slowbro's gone, so you don't need to run Covert Cloak as much. I'm just still not sure that Bonnet actually beats some of the bulky setup. Like, it probably beats DOD, depending on the moves you run. Crest probably beat Crest, but it has Moonblast, so it's a little worse. It's kind of just tough with Bonnet, man. I feel like it on paper beats some stuff, and then in practice it doesn't actually beat it. And in Bronzong, you like outwardly lose to the Demon set, which is rough. Grafaiai, grassy terrain. Terrain in general, though. I think Grafaiai is the best of the Unburdened mons if I had to pick. Heracross, it's nice that it actually kind of beats a lot of the Psychics. Terra Dark Hair, especially good for checking DOD. But since a lot of them, you know, if they Terra Steel, you just still CC them. Pre-Terra, you have Mega Horn. And then you have 2 more move slots. You can have Knockoff, and then you could run like Facade or Earthquake. Probably Facade best, though, to help with Crest. So, pretty good wall breaker for that. Hitmonlee. Terrain is good enough, so sure, Hitmonlee and B. NDD, and this is just talk about Male. Shouts to Lucario for making the tier maker here, by the way. But NDD Male, I think at least enabling Psychic Terrain is probably enough to put you in B. Since we can even look up here. There's quite a lot of priority up here. Like First Impression, Accelerock / Sucker Punch. Fake Out occasionally. Shadow Sneak occasionally. Extreme Speed. Mach Punch. Aqua Jet. Sucker Punch. There's a lot of priority, though, in the higher up tiers. And so I think Side Terrain alone, even if it's not a full Psychic Terrain team, I think gets enough respect from me to put it in B. Even if you're doing like semi-terrain with like Indeedee plus a Sceptile or Grafaiai on a team, it's not too bad. And Specs Indeedee is at least a respectable enough breaker. Could be worse. Ludicolo here, once again, I don't love it on Rain as much as others do, but it's not bad. And it definitely deserves to be recognized as a decent option for those teams, because it's a 3rd Rain setter. So, gets put here. Meloetta might even be better than I'm giving it credit for here. But ever since Mew left, it's had a lot more viable of a place in the tier. Whether it's for utility sets that are, you know, if you're going like Assault Vest with knockoff U-turn, whether you're talking like Calm Minds, like I tried out some weeks ago, good option. Quag, I don't know, man. It's fine. Unaware Quag will always have some sort of place in NU, and it's kind of annoying too because it's got Toxic and pretty good at punishing a lot of the mons that would switch into Earthquake with the Toxic. Rotom Heat here in B. I don't like Rotom Heat. Really don't. But Nasty Plot Rotom Heat can at least counter boost alongside Oricorio Pom Pom, which is cool. And in general, I feel like Plot plus Volt Switch is pretty good at punishing a lot of NU. It just kind of sucks for Rotom Heat that hurts a little bit better now. I've seen some people try out like Wisp plus Plot, but I can't buy into that. Having no recovery just doesn't sound good. So there's that. Rotom Mo. Decent enough Scarfer. Does a lot of the same stuff Rotom Heat does, although to a lesser degree of effectiveness. And frankly, with the rise of Slowbro, we're gonna just move you down. We're just gonna move you down. Scrafty here. I liked the Dragon Dance Encore set. Leave me alone. That set seemed pretty fun though. And having Encore is of course good for bulky setup too. Just a nice option for HO, you know? Thwacky here, Terrain obviously, and then Typh. Typh does a lot of the stuff Shandy does, just not as well in my experience. I think Specs is good because Eruption's so strong. I think maybe the coolest part about it is Infernal Parade versus the bulky Psychics though. Because even if they Terra, you still have like a decent chip if you have the status on them. And of course you could always pair this with like a T-Waver earlier to try and force a T-Wave onto one of them too, which is cool. A Bomb Snow here, this is just, I think snow teams are about B-. Galarian Articuno here. Decent on Hazard Stack, Hyper Offense because of competitive. Also decent on Grassy Terrain. just because you could do stored power, grassy seed with like agility weakness policy. Not too bad. Table here, it's like marginally better with Reuniclus and Slowbro, but I'm still not that sold on it as an option. It does have some matchups where it just puts in stupid amounts of work, but I think it has a long way to go. Velobolt and B-, it could even go lower at this point, frankly. I think a lot of its niche did come down to checking Zone and Thunderous, but it still does check Oricorio if it's just the taunt set. Not necessarily well, because you'll get taunted, and then what do you do back other than Volt? But I mean, you kind of check it, you can at least look for repositioning. You're bulky enough to check a lot of mons as well. Like with investment in physical bulk, you can take a lot of stray hits from foes like Feraligatr. Even Gallade, you could like trade a hit with. It's okay. You check Kilowattrel. So Titan, just paired up with Snow. Dreadnought, I honestly don't really rate Dreadnought at all, but it should be a little better in a Slowbro meta. And it's like an option for rain teams too. So, okay enough. To Dunsparce, it's a decent, bulky setup sweeper with Calm Mind. And CM plus Toxic's actually pretty cool. Especially once again, you know, again, steel types aren't too common. So, usually your Boom Bursts don't have a ton of great switch-ins, and those that switch into Boom Burst a lot of the time just get Toxic the next turn and not like it. Gastro B-, it's just really passive, so I fail to rate it too much more highly. But it's a decent team building option if you want. It compresses a lot into one slot between rocks and just all that it does defensively. Mo here, like I said, I don't really know what to make of Mo. It's just kind of a worse heat tum. Yeah. Though, if anything, I think a lot of the appeal comes from what you lure in with Trick and what you lure in and what you can hit with Trick. So there you go. Alola Slash, mostly for Snow, but there is a little bit of potential to it outside of Snow, just as a Steel type with like Hazard to spin. Sceptile, Terrain, but I feel like it's worse than the other ones. Screamtail here, it's an okay HO lead, but also it's seen some use on Hyper Offense as a sweeper, which is interesting. Venusaur and B-, this might even be too high. There we go. Wo-Chien, a little worse now with Slowbro gone, but I do still find that it's really, really annoying for opponents to take down. I mean, literally watch yesterday's video, man. Wo-Chien did well. Wo-Chien did very well. It's a good Basket Legion check, which is also like super important. Protect is generally just great for scouting out a lot. Feraligatr doesn't really beat you down too consistently, which is cool as well. There are some mons that you let in for maybe a little more free than I would like to, but not unbeatable. And, I mean, honestly, you're fine into the setup Psychic mons, is you just apply a lot of pressure to them with Ruination, and especially in the case of Cress, with Leech Seed. And in C rank, ah yes, all of these mons get 3 words max, as per usual. But let's see. Hisui Braviary, Specs or Setup? Espeon, Specs, and Imbounce. Gligar, Weird Roll Compression. Golurk, Strong Wall Breaker. Milotic, okay Water type. Raikou, okay Electric Pivot. Sandaconda, it beats Talonflame. Scovillain, Manual Sun. Smeargle, okay Hazard's Lead. Snorlax, okay Bulky Setup Sweeper. And Setup Sweeper is one word, I hope you knew that. And in Venusaur, Manual Sun. Isn't that great? Isn't that wonderful? Yeah, that's where I think I stand with a lot of these mons at the time. I hope y'all enjoyed. Of course, let me know down below if there's any like mon that you personally rate like really highly maybe right now that I wasn't as high on. Always interested to have y'all put me onto something new, but I'll catch y'all next time, man. Hope this helps as well for those of you that are trying to get into the new meta and just needed an idea of where mons go. Peace.